The gallery was closing in 10 minutes when Emma Pierce walked through the door, her mascara smudged and her heels dangling from one hand. And that was when Alexander Cross looked up from the sculpture he had been pretending to study for the last hour and felt his entire world tilt on its axis. She did not notice him at first. She was too busy trying to compose herself, wiping under her eyes with trembling fingers, her breath coming in short, uneven bursts. The security guard near the entrance gave her a sympathetic look, but said nothing. Alexander watched from across the wide marble floor as she moved toward a painting on the far wall, a massive abstract piece done in blues and grays that seemed to mirror whatever storm was happening inside her. He should have left. He had already stayed far longer than he intended, using the gallery as an escape from another suffocating board meeting where men twice his age told him how to run the company he had built from nothing. At 32, Alexander Cross was worth $3.7 billion, controlled manufacturing operations across 4 continents, and could not remember the last time he had felt anything remotely close to what stirred in his chest as he watched this stranger stand before a painting and cry. Emma stared at the swirling colors and tried to remember how to breathe. The wedding had been beautiful. Sarah had looked radiant in her dress, and Marcus had cried during his vows, and Emma had stood there as maid of honor with a smile plastered on her face while her heart quietly broke. Not because she loved Marcus, she had never loved Marcus, but because watching her younger sister marry the man of her dreams while their mother whispered too loudly about Emma being 28, and still single had finally cracked something open inside her that she had been keeping carefully sealed. She had left the reception early, making excuses about a headache, and had walked for blocks in her bridesmaid dress until her feet screamed in protest. The gallery had been a random choice, a lit doorway that promised quiet and beauty, and a few minutes where she did not have to think about her mother's disappointed sighs or her father's careful silence, or the fact that she had spent so long building her career as a trauma surgeon that she had somehow forgotten to build anything else. That one always makes me feel like I'm drowning. Emma jumped, spinning around to find a man standing a respectful distance away. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair that looked like he had been running his hands through it and eyes that were an impossible shade of gray-blue. He wore an expensive suit with the tie loosened and the top button undone, and there was something about the way he looked at her that made her suddenly very aware that she was standing in a public place in a wrinkled bridesmaid dress with her shoes in her hand. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice rough. "I didn't mean to intrude. I know you're closing soon." "You're not intruding." He moved closer, his hands in his pockets, his expression careful. "I'm Alexander." "Emma," she shifted her weight, feeling foolish and exposed. "I should probably go." "Or you could stay." The words came out before Alexander could stop them, before he could think through what he was doing. "They won't actually kick us out for another 15 minutes. I have it on good authority that the security guard is terrible at enforcing closing time." Despite everything, Emma felt a small smile tug at her lips. "Good authority. I may have been here past closing once or twice." Alexander gestured toward the painting. "Why drowning?" Emma turned back to look at it, considering. "I don't know. Maybe because it feels like being pulled under, but in a way that's almost peaceful. Like giving up would be easier than fighting." The honesty in her voice hit Alexander square in the chest. "Bad day, bad year maybe," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Bad life choices, take your pick." "I don't believe in bad life choices," Alexander said, surprising himself with the truth of it. "Just choices that lead us to where we need to be." Emma looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them that neither of them could name. It was not attraction, exactly, though there was plenty of that crackling in the air. It was recognition, the kind that happens when two people who have been lonely in a crowd for too long suddenly see each other clearly. "You want to get out of here?" Alexander asked, and then immediately wanted to kick himself because he sounded like every terrible pickup line ever uttered. "I mean, there's a coffee shop 2 blocks over. It's nothing fancy, but they stay open late and the coffee is terrible enough to be memorable. Emma should have said no. She should have thanked him politely and gone home to her quiet apartment and her quiet life. Instead, she found herself nodding. Okay. They walked out together just as the security guard began his closing rounds, and Emma slipped her heels back on with a grimace. Outside, the spring air was cool and sweet, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement from an earlier rain. Neither of them spoke as they made their way down the street, but the silence was comfortable rather than awkward. The coffee shop was exactly as Alexander had described it. A tiny hole-in-the-wall place with mismatched chairs, and a counter manned by a bored teenager who barely looked up from his phone when they entered. They ordered coffee, black for him and a latte for her, and found a table in the back corner away from the window. "So," Emma said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup, "do you make a habit of rescuing crying women from art galleries?" "Only on Saturdays." Alexander took a sip of his coffee and made a face. "I was right. This is terrible." "Then why do you come here?" "Because it's real." He set the cup down and met her eyes. "Everything in my life is carefully curated and designed to impress, and sometimes I just need something that's unapologetically bad at what it does." Emma studied him with the same focus she brought to reading CT scans. "What do you do? For work, I mean." "Manufacturing." "Industrial components, mostly." It was not exactly a lie, but it was not the whole truth either, and Alexander felt a twinge of guilt even as he said it. "What about you?" "I'm a surgeon. Trauma at Metro General." Emma watched his reaction carefully, but he only nodded with what seemed like genuine interest. Long hours, high stress, terrible work-life balance. All the things they warn you about in medical school that you think won't apply to you until they do. But you love it. It was not a question. Emma felt something loosen in her chest. "I do, or I did. Lately, I've been wondering if I've loved it too much, if I've used it as an excuse to not have anything else." Alexander understood that more than she could know. "Is that what tonight was about, the gallery? My sister got married today." The words spilled out before Emma could stop them. "She's 25 and so happy it's almost painful to watch, and I'm happy for her, I really am, but standing there at the wedding, I just felt so empty. Like I've been running so hard for so long that I forgot to actually live." The vulnerability in her voice made Alexander's throat tight. "I've never done this before," he admitted quietly. "Done what?" "This. Sat in a coffee shop with a stranger and talked about real things. Had a conversation that wasn't about market shares or production schedules or which board member is trying to undermine me this week." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Emma was beginning to recognize as habitual. "I've never felt this either, this urge to just be honest with someone." Emma's heart kicked against her ribs. "I'm shaking," she said, and it was true. Her hands trembled around her coffee cup, her whole body alive with nerves and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. "I don't know why. I think I do." Alexander reached across the table and covered her hand with his, and the touch sent electricity racing up Emma's arm. "I think we both just realized we're not alone." They stayed until the bored teenager kicked them out at midnight, talking about everything and nothing. Emma told him about medical school and her first surgery, and the patient who had thanked her with tears in his eyes after she saved his daughter's life. Alexander told her about building his first factory with borrowed money and a dream, about the terror of almost losing everything in the first year, about the strange isolation that came with success. He did not tell her about the billions or the board meetings, or the fact that his face had been on the cover of Forbes twice. Those things did not seem to matter in the warm cocoon of the coffee shop with this woman who looked at him like he was just a man. When they finally stepped back out onto the street, Emma was surprised to find that the weight she had been carrying all day had lifted. Alexander walked her to the corner where she could catch a cab, and they stood there in the glow of the streetlight like teenagers afraid to say goodbye. "Can I see you again?" Alexander asked, his voice rougher than he intended. "Yes," Emma did not even hesitate. When? Tomorrow, he pulled out his phone. Give me your number. She recited it, and he typed it in with fingers that were not quite steady, then immediately called her so she would have his. The phone buzzed in her small purse, and they both laughed at the absurdity of being so nervous. Tomorrow, Emma confirmed, and then, because she was feeling brave and reckless and more alive than she had in years, she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Thank you for tonight. Alexander watched her cab disappear into the flow of traffic and stood there on the corner like an idiot with his hand pressed to his cheek. He had closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, had fired executives twice his age without blinking, had built an empire through sheer force of will and ruthless determination. But one kiss on the cheek from Emma Pierce, and he was undone. The next morning, Emma woke to a text message that made her smile into her pillow. The coffee was terrible, but the company was perfect. Dinner tonight, I promised to find somewhere with better drinks. She texted back immediately, only if you let me pick the place. I know somewhere that serves wine that won't make you regret your life choices. His response came seconds later. Deal. 7 o'clock, she confirmed, and then spent the rest of the day in a daze that had her colleagues asking if she was feeling all right. She performed a complex splenectomy with hands that were rock steady, and a mind that kept drifting to gray-blue eyes, and a smile that made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying. Alexander spent the day in meetings that he barely paid attention to, earning concerned looks from his assistant and suspicious glares from his CFO. He signed papers without reading them, approved budgets without question, and finally gave up any pretense of productivity at 4 o'clock. I'm leaving, he announced to his assistant, a sharp woman named Patricia who had worked for him for 5 years and knew him better than most. Cancel anything else today. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You have the dinner with the investors from Tokyo. Reschedule it. Alexander, they flew in specifically to meet with you. Then they can fly in again next week. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, then paused. Patricia, have you ever met someone and just known? She studied him with knowing eyes. Known what? That everything was about to change. A slow smile spread across her face. Once, 23 years ago, married him 6 months later. Alexander nodded as if she had just confirmed something important. Good, that's good. Emma chose a small Italian place in the village, the kind of restaurant that had been there for 40 years and did not care about trends or Instagram. They sat at a corner table with a candle flickering between them, and Alexander thought she looked even more beautiful than she had the night before. She wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, and her hair was down, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. Tell me something you've never told anyone, Emma said after they ordered, her chin propped on her hand. That's quite an opening. But Alexander found himself wanting to answer, wanting to give her something real. I'm terrified of failing, not failing at business or failing to make money. Failing at being a decent human being. I have so much, more than anyone could ever need, and most days I feel like I'm not doing anything that actually matters. Emma reached across the table and took his hand, and the gesture felt as natural as breathing. You matter. You don't know that. You barely know me. I know enough. She squeezed his fingers. Your turn, ask me something. What would you do if you could do anything, if money and time and responsibility didn't exist? Emma thought about it, really thought about it. I'd still be a surgeon, she said slowly. But I'd do it differently. I'd work with doctors without borders or set up clinics in places that need them. I'd teach young doctors not just how to save lives, but how to have lives worth living. She paused. And I'd fall in love. Really, truly fall in love with someone who makes me feel like I did last night, like anything is possible. Alexander's heart hammered in his chest. Emma, too much. She bit her lip, suddenly looking vulnerable. I'm sorry, I tend to overshare when I'm nervous. Don't apologize. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, watching her eyes go wide. I want to know everything. Every dream, every fear, every random thought that crosses your mind at 3 in the morning. They stayed through 3 courses and a bottle of wine that was, as Emma had promised, excellent. They talked about books and movies and the ridiculous things they had believed as children. Emma told him about the time she had tried to perform surgery on her sister's teddy bear and accidentally made it worse. Alexander told her about building a fort in his backyard and charging the neighborhood kids admission, his first entrepreneurial venture at age 7. It was after 10 when they finally left, both of them reluctant to let the evening end. They walked without direction, just wandering through the lamp-lit streets while the city hummed around them. "I have to tell you something," Alexander said as they paused in front of a fountain in a small park. "And I should have told you before, but I was being selfish because I liked the way you looked at me like I was just a regular person." Emma's stomach dropped. "You're married?" "What? No." He turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to cup her face. "God, no, nothing like that. I'm single, I promise. It's just that when I said I work in manufacturing, that was true, but it was not the whole truth. I own the company, Cross Industries. I have 12 factories across the United States and operations in 17 countries, and apparently Forbes thinks I'm worth almost $4 billion, though that number changes daily based on stock prices and market volatility." Emma stared at him. "You're Alexander Cross, the Alexander Cross." "I'm the same person I was 5 minutes ago." "No, you're not." She stepped back and his hands fell away. "You're a billionaire, you're famous, your face is on magazine covers. Does that change anything?" His voice was rough with fear. "Does that change what we've been talking about, what I feel when I'm with you?" "I don't know." Emma pressed her hands to her temples. "I need a minute to process this." Alexander watched her pace, his heart in his throat. He had known this moment would come, had dreaded it, and now that it was here, he felt like he was watching everything good slip through his fingers. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" Emma finally asked. "Because for the first time in 10 years, someone was looking at me and not seeing dollar signs or opportunity or a means to an end. You saw me, just me, and I was terrified that if I told you, that would disappear." The honesty in his voice stopped her pacing. Emma looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same man who had made terrible coffee taste like heaven, who had listened to her fears without judgment, who had made her feel less alone. "I've never done this before," she said, her voice shaking. "I've never felt like this about someone I just met. I've never wanted to throw caution away and just jump. Then jump." Alexander closed the distance between them. "I've never felt this either, not with anyone, not ever. I've been with women who wanted my money or my status or the idea of me, but no one has ever wanted just me, until you. I don't know how to navigate this world." Emma gestured vaguely. "Your world. I'm a surgeon. I work 80-hour weeks and live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens. I don't do galas or charity auctions or whatever it is billionaires do with their free time. I don't care about any of that." His hands found hers, anchoring them both. "I care about you, about the way you look at paintings like they hold the secrets to the universe. About how you light up when you talk about your work, about the fact that you make me want to be better, do better, matter more." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "This is crazy. Completely insane," Alexander agreed, "but I don't want to walk away, do you?" She thought about it for all of 3 seconds. "No." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Emma wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "So where do we go from here?" Emma asked. "Wherever you want." He smiled, that beautiful smile that made her knees weak. "But maybe we could start with breakfast tomorrow. I know a place that makes pancakes that will change your life." "That's a bold claim. I'm a bold guy." He kissed her again, quick and playful. "Say yes." Yes. The next 3 months were a whirlwind. Alexander was right about the pancakes, and Emma was right about needing time to adjust to his world. They took it slow by necessity. Stolen hours between her shifts and his meetings. Late-night phone calls when they were both too exhausted to form coherent sentences, but needed to hear each other's voices anyway. Emma met Patricia, who approved immediately and started leaving subtle hints about Alexander's schedule whenever Emma called. Alexander met Emma's colleagues at a hospital fundraiser, where he wrote a check that made the development director nearly faint, and Emma punch his arm later for showing off. "I wasn't showing off," Alexander protested as they walked to his car. "It's for a good cause. You donated $5 million to a hospital fundraiser. That's showing off. Would you have preferred I donated less?" He opened her door with a grin. "I would have preferred you not make my colleagues think I'm dating you for your money." Alexander's smile faded. He closed her door and walked around to the driver's side, sliding in but not starting the car. "Is that what you think? That people will assume you're with me for my money?" Emma sighed. "I don't know what I think. I know that when we're alone, everything feels perfect and right. But then we go out in public and people stare, and I see them doing the math, trying to figure out what a billionaire is doing with a surgeon from Queens. You're not a surgeon from Queens." Alexander turned to face her. "You're the woman I'm falling in love with, and I don't give a damn what anyone else thinks about it." Emma's breath caught. "What did you just say? I'm falling in love with you?" He reached over and took her hand. "Actually, that's not true. I'm already there." "I'm in love with you, Emma Pierce. I love the way you sing off-key in the shower and the way you get that little wrinkle between your eyebrows when you're concentrating. I love that you've memorized the coffee orders of every nurse in your unit and that you cry during animal rescue videos. I love everything about you, and I've been terrified to say it because I didn't want to scare you away." Tears were streaming down Emma's face now. "You love me, completely, utterly, inconveniently, given that you keep punching me for writing checks." His attempt at humor was undercut by the vulnerability in his eyes. "Please say something. I love you too." The words burst out of her like they had been fighting to escape. "I've been in love with you since that second night when you took me to get pancakes at 2 in the morning because I had just lost a patient and couldn't sleep. Since you held me while I cried and didn't try to fix it, just let me feel it. Since you looked at me like I was the most important thing in your world." Alexander pulled her across the console and kissed her with everything he had, and Emma melted into him, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. "Come home with me," Alexander murmured against her lips. "Not for anything except to be together. I want to fall asleep with you in my arms and wake up with you next to me. I want to cook you breakfast and watch you steal all my blankets. I want everything, Em, all of it." "Okay," Emma kissed him again. "Yes, take me home." Alexander's home was a penthouse overlooking Central Park, all glass and steel and minimalist furniture that somehow managed to feel warm. They barely made it through the door before they were kissing again, desperate and hungry, hands fumbling with buttons and zippers. "Wait," Emma gasped, pulling back. "I've never done this before." Alexander froze. "Never? No, I mean I have, just not like this. Not with someone I'm in love with. Not with someone who matters this much." She was shaking again, her whole body trembling with want and fear and anticipation. "It scares me how much I want this." "I've never felt this either," Alexander said, echoing his words from that first night. "I've been with other women, but it was never like this. Never this overwhelming need to be as close as possible, to know every inch of you, to make you feel as incredible as you make me feel." They made their way to his bedroom, shedding clothes as they went, and when they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that stole Emma's breath. Alexander took his time, learning every curve and hollow, every spot that made her gasp, every touch that made her arch into him. Emma explored him with the same thoroughness she brought to her work, mapping the planes of his chest, the strength in his arms, the way he shuddered when she kissed his throat. Afterward, they lay tangled together in his massive bed, both of them boneless and sated. Emma traced lazy patterns on his chest while Alexander played with her hair. "I don't want to go back to my apartment," Emma admitted quietly. "I want to stay here with you, then stay." Alexander tilted her chin up so he could see her face. Move in with me. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I don't want to spend another night without you. Emma should have said it was too soon, that they needed more time, that moving in together after 3 months was insane. Instead, she found herself nodding. Okay, okay. Alexander's face split into a grin that made him look 10 years younger. Really, really. Emma laughed at his excitement. But I have conditions. I need space for my books, and I get control of the thermostat because you keep it too cold and I'm not giving up my job. I wouldn't ask you to. He rolled them over so he was braced above her, his eyes serious. Your work is part of who you are. I would never want you to change that. Good. She pulled him down for a kiss. Because I'm pretty sure I'm going to need it to maintain my sanity when I meet your family. Alexander groaned. My mother is going to lose her mind, in a good way or a bad way. She's been trying to marry me off for 10 years and will probably start planning the wedding before dessert way. Emma's eyes went wide. Wedding, eventually. Alexander kissed her nose. When you're ready. No pressure, I promise. But yeah, Em, eventually I want to marry you, I want everything with you. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt nothing but peace. Eventually sounds perfect. Meeting the Cross family was exactly as overwhelming as Emma had feared. Alexander's mother, Margaret, was a formidable woman who had Emma's entire life story extracted within 15 minutes of meeting her. His father, Robert, was quieter but no less intimidating, asking pointed questions about Emma's education and career with the air of a man used to vetting business partners. Alexander's younger brother, Adam, was the easiest, pulling Emma aside to tell her that he had never seen his brother this happy and to please not break his heart. I don't plan on it, Emma assured him. Good, because he's disgustingly in love with you. It's actually kind of nauseating how often he brings you up in conversation. Emma introduced Alexander to her family 2 weeks later, and that was its own special kind of chaos. Her mother cried, her father grilled Alexander about his intentions, and Sarah pulled Emma into the kitchen with wide eyes. That's Alexander Cross, Sarah hissed. The billionaire. You're dating a billionaire and you didn't tell me. I was going to tell you, Emma protested. I just needed time to adjust to it myself. Does he have a brother? Sarah was joking, but Emma still swatted her arm. You're married, remember, happily married, to Marcus. I know, Sarah's expression softened. But seriously, Emma, I've never seen you like this. You're glowing. He makes you happy. He does. Emma glanced through the doorway to where Alexander was patiently answering her father's questions about manufacturing processes. He really does. 6 months after that first night in the gallery, Alexander took Emma back to the same spot. They stood in front of the blue and gray painting, and Emma leaned into his side with a contentment she had never imagined possible. Still feel like drowning? Alexander asked. No, Emma turned to look at him. Now it just feels like peace. Good. He pulled a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee, and Emma's hands flew to her mouth. Emma Pierce. I know we haven't been together that long, and I know this is probably too fast by most people's standards, but I also know that I have never been more sure of anything in my entire life. You make me want to be better. You make me feel like I matter. You make everything brighter and more real and infinitely more precious. Will you marry me? Yes. Emma was crying again, but these were happy tears, joyful tears. Yes, absolutely yes. Alexander slipped the ring on her finger, a simple platinum band with a sapphire that matched her eyes, and kissed her as people around them applauded. Emma laughed against his lips, giddy with happiness, and Alexander picked her up and spun her around like they were in a movie. They were married 4 months later in a small ceremony at the gallery where they met, surrounded by family and close friends. Emma wore a simple white dress that made Alexander's breath catch, and Alexander cried during his vows, not caring who saw. They honeymooned in Italy. 2 weeks of lazy mornings and afternoon naps and long dinners that stretched into the evening. When they returned, Emma continued her work at the hospital while Alexander restructured his priorities, delegating more and working from home whenever possible so he could be with his wife. They talked about the future, about children and legacy and what they wanted their life to look like. "I've been thinking," Alexander said one night as they cooked dinner together in their kitchen, "about what you said that first night, about working with Doctors Without Borders and setting up clinics." Emma looked up from chopping vegetables. "What about it? What if we did it? What if we used some of my resources to fund clinics in underserved areas? You could oversee the medical side, train doctors, do exactly what you said you wanted to do." Emma set down her knife. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious." Alexander moved to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I've been looking for ways to make my money matter, to do something that actually helps people. This could be it. We could build something together that changes lives. That would be incredible." Emma turned in his arms, her eyes shining. "We could really make a difference." "Then let's do it." They launched the Cross Pierce Foundation 18 months after they met, a nonprofit dedicated to providing medical care and training in areas that needed it most. Emma scaled back her hours at the hospital to focus on the foundation, traveling to sites, training doctors, and building something that mattered. Alexander handled the business side, leveraging his connections and resources to maximize their impact. 3 years after that first night in the gallery, Emma discovered she was pregnant. She told Alexander over breakfast on a random Tuesday, sliding the positive test across the table with shaking hands. Alexander stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," Emma confirmed, and then she was in his arms, both of them laughing and crying at once. Their daughter was born on a snowy December morning, a tiny, perfect thing with Emma's dark hair and Alexander's eyes. They named her Sophie Grace, and Alexander held her with the same careful reverence he had shown Emma from the very beginning. "I've never done this before," he whispered as Sophie slept in his arms. "Being a father, I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up." "You're not going to mess it up." Emma was exhausted and sore and had never been happier. "And even if you do, we'll figure it out together." "Like we figure everything out. Together," Alexander agreed, leaning over to kiss his wife. "Always together." 5 years later, they had 2 more children, a boy named James and another girl named Lily. Their house was always full of noise and laughter, and the beautiful chaos of a family that loved each other fiercely. Emma still did surgeries twice a week and ran the foundation with a passion that inspired everyone around her. Alexander had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Cross Industries to focus on philanthropy and being present for his family. They still went back to the gallery every year on the anniversary of the night they met, standing in front of that blue and gray painting while their children ran around looking at art. And every time, Alexander took Emma's hand and thanked whatever fate had brought them together. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked one year as they stood there, watching Sophie try to explain modern art to her younger siblings. "I'm thinking about how I almost left the gallery before you walked in." Alexander pulled her close. "I'm thinking about how different my life would be if I had left 5 minutes earlier." "But you didn't." Emma squeezed his hand. "You stayed and I walked in and everything changed." "Everything changed," Alexander agreed. "I've never regretted a single moment of it. Not even when I made you watch that 12-hour documentary series about cardiac surgery." "Okay, maybe that one moment," he laughed when she elbowed him. "But even that was worth it because I got to hold you while you excitedly explained every procedure." They left the gallery as the sun was setting, their children trailing behind them like ducklings, and drove home to the life they had built together. That night, after the kids were in bed, Alexander and Emma sat on their back porch with glasses of wine and watched the stars come out. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Emma asked, her head resting on Alexander's shoulder. "About how scared we both were, all the time." Alexander kissed the top of her head. "I think about how you were shaking when you told me you had never done that before. How I told you I had never felt that way either. And now I can't imagine feeling any other way." He set down his wine and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Emma Cross. You and our children and this life we've built. I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." Emma felt the familiar sting of happy tears. "I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Don't be scared." Alexander wiped away her tears with gentle thumbs. "We've got this. We've always got this." "Always," Emma agreed, and kissed her husband under the stars, grateful for every moment that had led them here. To this perfect life they had built from a chance meeting and a willingness to jump without knowing where they would land. They had jumped together, and they had found everything they never knew they needed.